Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is currently March, huzzah! Anyone else just so excited for the spring? I had to pull out my spring glasses. I'll give you a little close-up. And yeah, I'm really excited. So today I'm just talking about and going over the books that I read in February. February, weirdly, was a really good reading month for me. I ended up reading 15 books in February. 15. I'm proud of myself. I think that's the most books that I've read since August of last year, and I don't even think I read 15 books then. I think it was around like 13. August of last year, and I don't even think I read 15 books then. I think it was around like 13. So I'm just like so pleased. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the books. Well, first actually, let's jump into some stats. This was a really interesting reading month. I read a lot of things that I wouldn't usually read, a lot of things that have been recommended to me or that I've seen on BookTube, and yeah, well, yeah, you'll see. So 3 of the books that I read in February were nonfiction. Yes, you heard that right. 3 nonfiction books in the month of February. I am as shocked as you are. 5 of the books are romance. I read a lot of fantasy romance, and a couple of them I'm not counting as romance because they are technically a fantasy book that has a romance in them. 2 of the books I read in February were graphic novels. I read 1 thriller. I read 2 children's books, 7 fantasy books. I'm also counting the fantasy romance in this section. I read 1 picture book, and I read 1 collection of poetry. 5 of the books that I read in February were written by BIPOC authors, which is not fantastic, but it's better than none. So that's, you know, a third of the books that I read. I'd really like to change that and have it be around half is what I would like to shoot for. 2 of the books that I read were written by LGBT plus authors, and 3 other books had LGBT characters present. And then of the 15 books I read in February, 6 of them were ebooks. None of them were audio. The rest obviously were physical books. So let's jump into what I read. The first book I read in February, or finished in February, was The Library Book by Susan Orlean. This is a nonfiction book. It is kind of true crime, kind of historical. The premise of it is that it is about the Central Library of in Los Angeles and the fire that happened there in the late 80s, I think. I don't quite remember. There was a lot of damage, and I wish I had I like marked it in the book, but then I had to return it to the library. But it was very interesting because they talk about like how many gallons of water it took to put out the fire and stuff like that, and it was very interesting. The book also really went into like the history of the Central Library in Los Angeles, which I found very interesting. There's this one person who, so there was a woman who was in charge of the library, and she did so many great things for the library, and then they decided to basically fire her and replace her with a man who had no experience with libraries and really did not do shit for that branch. So there's the tea. It's very interesting because, you know, library people who work at the library, it's very dominated by women. But this really showed like the history of how at one point, even though it was still dominated by women, they always preferred to have men as the director or the managers of branches. So yeah, it was an interesting read. I think there were parts of it that were a little dry, like she talks about architecture at one point. I'm just like, don't care. But it was good. I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it. Like, if you're a library user, I highly recommend it. Also, if you're just like somebody who loves books, I think it's really like interesting to know. Also, I think it's interesting because a lot of people don't know about this fire ever happening because it happened at the same time that the Chernobyl disaster happened. And so like that's a reason why some like even at the time so many people had never heard of this happening. So I just think that's interesting. The next book that I reread The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. So the first time I read this book was, I don't even remember. Let's see if Goodreads will tell me. Okay, so I first read it Christmas Day in 2018. That's very interesting. And I gave it, I think, 4 stars at the time. But then I completely forgot everything about it, and having watched like Noelle Gallagher recently and how much she loves The Hating Game, I'm just like, I don't remember shit about that book. It was not memorable. And like she got her strawberry tattoo and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, where is this strawberry coming from? So it's just like, I shocked and surprised. And then I heard that it was being adapted by Netflix, maybe? I don't remember, but it's being adapted into a movie, and Lucy Hale is playing the main character, and the casting is on point. Lucy Hale is the main character. But if you don't know, this is a romance novel that follows a girl named Lucy who works at a publishing company, and she's like the assistant to one of the founders, and then the love interest slash person she hates the most is the other assistant for the other co-founder of the publishing company, and they like play these like hating games. You know, it's funny, and then you know, it turns into a romance. I don't want to say too much because I mean, obviously we know how it ends, but like it's good. I highly recommend it. It's very good. It's very entertaining. I think it's interesting because I was reading some reviews, and they were there was one review because the main the love interest, he kind of feels like everyone prefers his brother over him. This is his brother being like the good guy and like himself being like the not good guy. And I saw a review saying like this person was like tired of the love interest just like shitting on all of the like the good guy, and how like we should be supporting the good guy, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, first of all, he's the good guy. You know, I kind of identified with his character because he talks about how he comes across to people as rude or like dismissive, but he doesn't want to. And so I feel like I kind of as well. Sometimes I may come across as a little rude. I don't mean to. Like, I have major RBF. So I kind of identified with him in that way, and so I really enjoyed it the second time around a lot more, and I just highly recommend. The next book I read was Intimations by Zadie Smith. This is a very short collection of essays that she wrote during the initial stages of the pandemic. Okay, so this was published in July of last year. So these are very like brief, what she's thinking, musings about the pandemic very early on. I thought it was very powerful and very important. There was specifically something, if I can find it, that I would like to share. In this essay, this is the one called The American Exception, and she says, "People thank God for essential workers they once considered lowly, who not so long ago they despised for wanting $15 an hour." And I was just like, yes. This is very good. I highly recommend it, and I know that, so all of the author's royalties will go to charity. This edition benefits the Equal Justice Initiative and the COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund for New York. So if you're interested, I'd highly recommend buying it. It's only $10.95, and the royalties go to a good cause. The next book I read was an adorable children's graphic novel, and it is Seance Tea Party, and this was written by Reimena. I loved this book. It was so cute. It's about a girl whose kind of friend group is growing up, but she still, like, she's a child and she wants to be a child. She wants to know, you know, like, go play in the woods and just have like, she has a very strong imagination, and she decides to have a tea party in her, I think it's when she goes into her attic, her house's attic. She discovers the ghost Laura, who lives in her house, and so Laura kind of becomes her friend, and then, I'm sorry, Alexa is the ghost, and she's the ghost that haunts the house. And then Laura, throughout the novel, like, she grows up, and so then Alexa, who is the ghost, she obviously, like, she's not aging, so like she is then experiencing what Laura went through as, you know, Laura starts to grow up and doesn't want to do the same things. So it's a very great graphic novel about growing up and how children, you know, should be children. It was cute. I loved the artwork. It was very fun, and I highly recommend it. The next book I read was One by One by Ruth Ware, which I gave 3 stars. I feel like I keep forgetting to give star ratings for the other books that I read. The last book, The Seance Tea Party, I gave 4 stars. Intimations gave 5 stars. The Hating Game, 5 stars. Okay, so One by One by Ruth Ware, I gave 3 stars. This book is about a company who's like their main employees, like the founders and like the executive whatevers, go on this like kind of team building getaway where they go to this chalet and like to go skiing and like team building exercises and talking about the future of the company and whatnot. And then a major avalanche happens and they get stuck in the chalet, and then people go missing one by one. We're following 2 perspectives in this book, and one of them is one of the stakeholders in the company, but she no longer works for the company, but she was still asked to come because she's a stakeholder, so she can take part in major decisions. The other character's perspective that we're following is one of the chalet employees, and it goes back and forth between those 2 characters, and we're kind of just, it's like your basic thriller trying to uncover like what's happening, trying to get out. Things happen, people do things, and then, you know. So I gave this 3 stars because I thought it was basic. It was kind of predictable, but I didn't mind it being predictable. It was just kind of meh. It was just okay, you know? I have no real feelings about this book. I did like how the villain like progressed through this story. I thought it was very well done, and it was predictable, but I felt like it was good. I was just like, that's good. It's a bit different, you know? So I did really like that. But I felt like the ending dragged on for no reason, like after like you figure out who did what, and where everyone who went missing is, you kind of just like, why is the story keep going? So it was fine. The next book that I read was Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. I thought it was very adorable. It's a retelling kind of, you know, Snow White, Rose Red. They are 2 sisters who, in the beginning, their father is a very, I don't even know what he is. He's like a merchant maybe. And so they're very rich. They have a very nice house. They have a nice life. And then their father goes missing one day, and they have to move to like this cabin in the woods. And so they, you know, play in the woods, and then, you know, some other things start happening. Other people are going missing. And there's just kind of this presence in the woods. And then Snow and Rose, children who, you know, travel and play in the woods, find out what's happening and save the day. It's that kind of novel. Absolutely adorable. I gave it 4 stars. There are also some illustrations throughout the book, and they're very well done, and I thought it was really cute. Very easy to read, very fun. It was very predictable, but like in the most heartwarming way. And you know, I'm an adult reading a children's book, so I'm okay with it being predictable, but it was cute. I really liked it, and I highly recommend it. And I love the little quote, well, the blurb on the back. It says, Snow and Rose didn't know they were living in a fairy tale. People never do. So, highly recommend. So the next 3 books that I read were fantasy romance books that I kind of just like searched the interwebs for recommendations, and I got some. The first book was A Promise of Fire by Amanda Bouchet, and this is the first book in the Kingmaker Chronicles. Our main character is Kat, and she is basically a human lie detector, and she's basically trying to keep a low profile in the world because she knows that because of her power, a lot of kingdoms and rulers would want her, basically keep her as a slave, servant, whatever, so that they can remain in power. This book is kind of strange because it has a Greek mythology kind of aspect to it, but it's not in our world. It's a completely different world, but they have Greek gods that like they interact with and everything, and some of the people in the world have magic, some don't. It's very strange. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked the beginning of it. I liked the slow burn romance. I actually really liked the romance, but I hated how this book ended because I thought, as many romance novels do, that the first book would be about the 2 characters, the next book would be about a set of different characters, but like still keeping the story going. But no, it ends in a dumb cliffhanger where, you know, the next book is still going to be about the same 2 characters, and like they decide to be together, but like it's just going to happen in the second book, and I'm really pissed. So I don't know if I'm going to finish the series just in spite. The next book, the next fantasy romance was A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair, which is another Greek mythology retelling. It is basically, it's a Hades and Persephone retelling, which is my favorite kind of retelling when it comes to Greek mythology. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It is about Persephone and Hades, but they're living in a modern world. Hades is a club owner. He has a ton of money, though he still also is ruling the underworld. And Persephone is, you know, the goddess of spring, and she is living amongst humans, trying to keep a low profile. They know that her mother Demeter had a daughter, but they don't know that Persephone is her daughter, so none of her friends know that she's a goddess. And it's kind of about a deal that Persephone and Hades make because of a game that they enter, so Persephone loses the bet, and therefore she has to, within, I think it was 6 months, cultivate life in the underworld. And yeah, I really loved it. I don't know if I'm going to continue with the series because, again, it's still about Persephone and Hades, and when like romance novels drag out characters, like drag out books with a lot like the same characters, there's always a ton of drama, and I don't like that, so I don't know if I'll continue with it, even though I really loved the first book. And then the third book of my fantasy romance kind of weekend that I had was Radiance by Grace Draven. I gave this book 3 stars. It is about 2 characters who are different kind of species, and they are forced into an arranged marriage so that their respective kingdoms can have an alliance with each other. They both in the beginning are kind of just like, ew, you're ugly, I don't like you, but they strike up a friendship, and then that eventually leads into their romance. The first book in the series pretty much revolves around just them learning about each other and developing the romance. I liked that, but what I didn't like is that we don't know a single freaking thing about the characters as individuals. We only know them as a couple, so I thought that was it was like poor character development, as they didn't have an initial character at all. But I may continue with the series because the next book, I read a little blurb, and that sounds really interesting. The next book that I read in February, or finished in February, was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I have debated doing a rant review about this book, but I'm not going to because I don't want to dwell on the negative. I didn't like this book, but I just don't want to hate on it anymore, you know? I'm giving this book 2 stars. If you don't know anything about this book, it is about Addie LaRue, who is born in like the 1600s? Yeah, late 1600s, and she is about to be forced into an arranged marriage, and she doesn't want to. She wants to be free, which I completely agree with that. But but she calls out to the darkness, to gods, and someone answers, and they strike up a bargain deal that for her soul, Addie LaRue will be free for the rest of her life. The cost, though, comes later when she realizes that no one ever remembers her. And then the big twist, not big twist, but like the big plot point of the book is that someone finally does. And I will say that I didn't like the majority of the characters in this book. There's one character that I was okay with. The other ones I pretty much hated. Addie LaRue is terrible in the fact that she lived for 300 years and does not change from the beginning to the end of this book. She's exactly the same. There is no character development in this book. My other issue with this book is the writing style. I've heard, like, every review that I've watched, everyone's like, I just love the writing style, it's so beautiful, and blah, blah, and I'm just like, I hated it. I felt like V.E. Schwab was trying way too hard to be, like, whimsical and different, and I absolutely hated it. The character who eventually, like, remembers Addie, he gets his own chapters a few times, and I hated them. I hated them so much. I'm trying to find, there's a specific way that, okay, like this here, I don't want to show you exactly what he's saying, but like this kind of format where it's almost like a poem, but it's not. I hated it, and it happens twice in this book, and I hate it so much. So, like, I hate the writing style. The only reason why I'm giving this book 2 stars instead of 1 is that I liked the historical aspects of this book. I thought it would have been so much better if V.E. Schwab kind of, you know, developed those and show, like, someone cannot go through World War I, World War II, like all of these wars and all of this disaster and not change. So I felt like it was missed opportunity. This book could have been so much better, and I'm really disappointed in it. I also hated the ending. When I was finished, I was just like, I'm disappointed in V.E. Schwab for writing that ending. That is how I felt about this book. And it makes me so upset too, because like, I love Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I love it so much. And then reading this book, I'm just like, I would, if I read that this was my first book by her that I read, I wouldn't pick up any of her other ones. So that is how I feel about that. Rant over. I'm done with that book, not talking about it. But to make up for that, I did read Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert, and I gave it 5 stars. This is the second book in the Brown sisters trilogy. The first one was Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I didn't love that book. It was just okay to me, but Take a Hint, Dani Brown I thought was fantastic. The characters were so well done. There was so much good development, so much like groundwork. They were very nuanced. Characters were just so good, and I just absolutely loved the romance. Both of the characters, I felt like I could connect with both of them in very different ways, and I just really felt like that is the marker of a good book, when you feel like you can connect to the main characters. And the plot moved perfectly, and I just loved it. There's like discussion on anxiety that I thought was just on point. The diversity in this book too was just so easy, and I love that about Talia Hibbert's books. Like, she can write like LGBT characters, and it's not like you feel like the author's just doing that so that she can have a diverse book. Like, it's there because it's right, and you know? So I just really enjoyed this book. If you don't know anything about it, Dani Brown is a PhD candidate, and she does not ever want to be in love. She doesn't have time for relationships. But there's one time where an emergency happens in her building, and the security guard kind of rescues her. His name is Zaf, and they kind of, because of this, he like carries her out of the building, and a lot of the like people and the students like take pictures and like post it on the internet, and they become this huge internet sensation, which is totally adorable. And they decide to have a like fake date basically to help both of their career, well, to help Zaf mostly. And then they decide to be friends with benefits, and romance ensues after some struggle. And it was very well done. The next book I read was The ABCs of Black History by Cortez. This is the picture book that I read. It was very well done. I really liked it. I thought it was very informative, but also like a great story for young children. And then it really, I feel like, would help spark a lot of conversation with young kids, and then also just, you know, wanting to read more about these characters. So I thought it was well done. I really liked the illustrations. I gave it 5 stars. The next book I read was If They Come For Us by Fatimah Asghar. This is a collection of poetry, and I'm giving it 3 stars. I'm not a fan of modern poetry in the sense, like, there are certain poems that I don't enjoy. Like, for example, in this book, there are a couple of poems about the vagina, which you might find interesting, but I did not. Like, I think there's also something about, like, hair. I don't know. I just, like, those are the type of poems that I can't enjoy. Like, I just don't. I think I enjoy more, like activism poetry and, like, life, like, hard-hitting life, like, different walks of life kind of, like, those types of things. Those are what I enjoy more, and a lot of the poems are about partition, which was an event of Pakistan, India. I see, like, as an American, obviously I have a very American centralized historical knowledge, so I don't know anything about any other countries, which that is the problem with the American school system anyway. But I thought, like, those poems were very interesting and informative in a very powerful way, and I liked those poems. I really love this cover, so 3 stars. I don't love modern poetry, and that's on me, not on her. The next book that I read and loved and adored, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I'm giving this book 5 stars. I know some people haven't liked this book. Also, like, I feel like there's been a lot of hate about this cover, but I really like the cover. When I was on Goodreads, I found so many just, like, disparaging, rude comments about the cover. I'm just like, if you don't like it, that's one thing, but to say it's terrible is rude, because it's not bad. And it's very, like, it's hurtful to the artist, so maybe rethink your word choice. Anyway, I really liked this novel. If you don't know anything about the series, it's the first book is kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and then it kind of transforms into this huge high fantasy world that has complex political and magical systems and whatnot, and I really enjoyed this book as it centers on a new character, Nesta, who is the main character's sister from the first 3 books. And Nesta has gone through a lot of trauma, and she basically is coping with that by being a terrible person. And so in the beginning of the book, her family, her sister and her sister's new family, are just like, we've been trying to give you a chance to help you cope, but you're ruining your life and you're making it very difficult for us, so you need to do this or you're out of here. So that's kind of the premise. It's about, like, coping with trauma, recovering from trauma, and realizing about how you want to live your life. It's so great about anxiety and just building strong characters. It's just so good. There's, like, a Valkyrie retelling in this too, which I absolutely adore. I really loved this. Also very steamy, very, very, very steamy, and I really liked that as well. The other books are kind of steamy, but, like, not as much. This one is, like, a lot, and I loved it. I was here for it. I really liked the romance. I loved how it progressed, how they were kind of, like, not friends with benefits, and then they end up, you know, they love each other, and they just really needed to tell each other, but it was hard for them because they're both very stubborn characters. But anyway, loved this book, 5 stars. The last book I read in February was Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. Again, this is Volume 2. I gave the first book in the series 3 stars. Didn't really like it because I felt like it was very lacking in development, and I thought it was kind of boring. This one is definitely better, still lacking a little bit in development, but I think it's getting better, and as it is a graphic novel series, I think it might be better to judge the series as a whole. But this is a story about 2 boys who become best friends, and then they start developing feelings for each other. It's so adorable. The friendships and relationships in this are just so adorable and fun, and I think it's a great story, great representative story of a lot of different kind of relationships, love, sexualities, genders. Very well done. Highly recommend. I really like the art style. Alice Oseman, I think, does a good job telling stories, and she is the same age as me and makes me feel very inferior. So definitely recommend. Check out her books. But yeah, I'm giving it 4 stars. So that is everything that I read in February. Like I said, this was a fantastic reading month. I read some stinkers, but I really read some awesome books that I'm really happy that I finally got to. And I'm just very pleased and excited to get into March, into some spring reads. And thank you for watching this video. Tell me what you read in February, what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, what you're reading next in March. And I will see you in a new video soon. Bye! As I was starting to clean up, one of the books gave me a paper cut, so I now hate it.